If I were buying my first home today and I had $40,000 saved, here's exactly what I do. I'm gonna walk you through how I break down that budget, avoid wasting money, and still get into a beautiful home that I love. And I'll share the one mistake I see way too many first-time buyers make that ends up costing them thousands. First, let's split that $40,000 budget into buckets, and let's base it off a $300,000 to $350,000 home. Now, the first part is the down payment. This isn't gonna be the entire $40,000, but just a portion of it. And what the down payment is it's a percentage of the purchase price that you as the buyer are gonna be responsible for. The next item is closing costs. Now, closing costs are gonna be all of the different services that need to be provided during the closing or before the closing. This can be like lender fees, underwriting, mortgage processing, attorney charges, title insurance, as well as prepaid items like property taxes and homeowners insurance that have to be paid at the closing. Now, the last piece is gonna be an emergency cushion, reserves. And this is what so many people forget. It's really important to have an emergency fund so that if something comes up in your life, you've got the ability to make that mortgage payment even if you have an interruption in income. And I see all the time people get into a home and then a couple months in, they have an emergency come up, maybe a medical issue, maybe you have to take some time off of work or do some traveling unpaid. And during this time, they're in a financial panic mode. And the reason is because they don't have this emergency cushion, this reserve. So in all the examples we'll be talking about, it's important you understand that that reserve is not a potential or maybe I should do it. This is a necessity if you want to be a successful home buyer. You have to have some money set aside for reserves. The biggest trap that I see first-time buyers falling in is dumping the entire $40,000 into their down payment or closing. And that's a huge mistake. As we've talked about, having some money in reserve is so important. We recommend anywhere between 3 and 6 months of your mortgage payment. So for example, if your mortgage payment is $2,000 a month, you're gonna wanna have $6,000 to $12,000 in that emergency fund, in that reserve, so that you can weather any financial storm that comes up and get beyond that financial stress. Choosing the right loan program is a really important part of your down payment and of what you're gonna be doing with your money. So let's talk about FHA versus conventional. So on FHA, you're gonna be only required to put 3.5% down. And this is gonna give you a lot more flexibility on your credit as well. Now, FHA also can pair with certain down payment assistance options that'll cover that 3.5% down for you. Now, conventional loans generally require a minimum of 3% down, and a lot of buyers put 5% down, which can give you a better interest rate and a lower payment. So we use the conventional 3 to 5% down if you have strong income, a low debt to income ratio, and if your credit is on the stronger side. Generally, we're not looking at conventional if your credit is below 680 to 700. Now, conventional also has potential down payment assistance options, but they're not as common as the FHA one. Now, let me myth bust here for a second in explaining that you don't need 20% down to buy a home. As you're seeing here, we're showing options with 3.5% and 3% down, 5% down, but you definitely don't need 20%. So don't let that outdated advice stop you from moving forward with a pre-approval and the home buying process. I want to give you an example or a couple examples of how 40,000 could stretch far with each option. Okay, so let me bust out the whiteboard here and let's talk through some breakdowns. So FHA, we'll start out with an FHA example here. We'll say an FHA with a $500,000 purchase price. Okay, I think in many markets, that would be about an average home nowadays, right? So if we take the 3.5% down, that's gonna be your down payment on the FHA. So that's gonna be $17,500. 3.5% of 500,000 is 17,500. Now, we also need to factor in closing costs, 3 to 4% of the price of the home. So for this, I'm gonna factor in 12,500 towards closing costs. Okay, but you'll notice there's money left over here. We have about 10,000 left over here, and that's gonna go towards the reserves we were talking about, having that extra money left over after closing, okay? So when you add all this up, you come up with the 40,000 that we were talking about. So you can buy a $500,000 home with $40,000 and still have money left over. That's the really cool part. A lot of people don't think is reasonable, but it is. And this $10,000 equates to about 3 months of mortgage payments, 3 months PITI, which is really the minimum that you want in your emergency or reserve fund, okay? So that's FHA. Now let me show you a conventional option here. Conventional, and for this option, we'll do a $400,000 home, and let's get a little bit bigger on the down payment. Let's go with 5% down on this one, okay? So 400,000, 5% down, that's gonna put you with a $20,000 down payment here out of your 40,000. And on this, the closing costs will be a little bit lower on 400 versus 500. So let's go with 11,000 towards closing costs on this one. Oops, just put it in the wrong place. So closing costs and prepaids, 11,000, okay? And then this one, we're gonna have reserves left over, which is gonna be 9,000. Again, about 3 to 4 months of PITI, 3 to 4 months of mortgage payments. So on this conventional example, you're able to buy a $400,000 home with 5% down, pay all your own closing costs, still have 3 months in reserve, all with just $40,000. A lot of people don't think it's possible, but I'm showing here exactly how you can get it into a home with this small amount of money, $40,000. I think many people would see that if you're buying a $400,000 or $500,000 home, $30,000, $40,000 is not a big percentage, but you can do it with the right strategy. Now, I want to also talk to you about the down payment assistance, first-time home buyer grants or down payment programs. These are only applicable in certain areas, but you want to talk to your lender about the different options that they have for you. And the last option that I want to mention is using that down payment assistance. So if you did a $450,000 home with a 0 down payment, 12,000 towards closing, then that would leave you with $28,000 left over, okay? $450,000 home, no money down, 12,000 out of your 40 going toward closing costs, that would leave 28,000 left over. Why would you do that? Because what if you're buying a home that needs some renovation, it needs some repairs? You want to do that and still have the money to be able to pay for it without having to go into your 401k or borrow from credit cards or other high interest. So using down payment assistance can make sense even if you have 40,000 saved, so you can do this extra work, do the renovations, do the repairs, and still have money left over again for that reserve fund. Now let's talk about the big mistake that I see that people do wrong every day. They try to qualify for the maximum amount and then they spend it all. This is the biggest issue I see all the time. So a recently approved client came to me, Ashley and Travis. We approved them for $400,000 on a VA loan, but they ended up buying a home for only $335,000. This was important because they ended up having a child and they had a lot more flexibility in their budget because they bought well below their means. So buying below that maximum qualification is smarter. I know that you can't always do that depending on your market and your financial circumstance, but it's so amazing if you can, because life throws us all these different financial obstacles. And if you have money set aside, the savings, the reserve, the extra funds, you're gonna be able to really be flexible and take whatever life throws at you with a grain of salt. You're gonna have less stress with your finances. And in the case of this client, they had the extra money, so when that baby was born, they were able to actually pay for everything and not have to get deep into debt, not have that financial stress. So really what it's about is paying your bills comfortably every month and still having money left over to save. How much? Well, a good rule of thumb is 10 to 20% of your income. If you can pay all your bills comfortably and still save 10 to 20% of your income, you're in a really strong financial position. And a bonus tip for you is make sure you're working with a lender before you actually go house hunting, because you want to go over this financial part. You want to get a good handle on your home buying budget, discuss your savings goals, financial planning, and ensure the new mortgage that you're getting fits into your overall financial plan. And I was able to do that with the clients I just told you about because we determined that their budget at the high level they were approved for was going to put them in a tight spot financially. So that's why they ultimately determined that it made more sense to buy well below their financial means. So if you've got $40,000 saved, you're in a strong position, but only if you play it smart. Break that money into the right buckets, pick the best loan for your situation, and avoid the trap of stretching your budget too far. If you want help figuring out exactly how this would look for your situation, I work with first-time buyers throughout the US. So book a call with me today at the link below, and let's run some numbers together.